Hey, I'm James from Smokin' Dad Barbecue, and today we're doing brisket on the Big Joe. You guys have been asking for this, and I am so excited. This is only my second low and slow cook using the Big Joe, and I couldn't wait to dig into something like a brisket. Now, we did a little bit different than what I normally do for a brisket. If you've seen my other videos, you know that I love 270, 275 degrees for turning out an amazing brisket. And I like this temperature range because over the past 10 years, I've just found that a smaller fire burning hotter produces a much better result. We get better smoke ring, and more importantly, we get better smoke flavor than a large amount of charcoal just sputtering along. But to be fair, I actually haven't tried that lower temperature range of 230, 250 degrees on my Kamado Joe. I just went straight for a temperature that I knew I loved. I also haven't done it on the Big Joe. This is the first brisket that we've done on the Big Joe. And I've actually never tried those sub 250 temperatures using the SloRoller. And so not only because you guys asked, but there was 3 other things that you really got me curious about, which is Big Joe, SloRoller, and Kamado Joe on these lower temperatures. I'm gonna step back in time and cook this brisket overnight using a lower temperature than what I've been using the last couple years. So this video, I'm gonna take us back to yesterday in the middle of the afternoon when we built our fire to get ready for this cook. I'll show you how to build the fire, add smoking wood, where to light your grill so we get stable temperatures throughout the night. We can just go to bed and not be using any electronics to control our pit. Then I'll rejoin you later in the evening when we're going to trim up our brisket and then add our seasonings. And then I'll rejoin you in the present moment as we start to figure out our work back schedule, which is how we're going to get this brisket to finish exactly where you want it. There's a lot to cover, and I also had some other key learnings that happened throughout this cook, and I started to talk about them and I couldn't just fit it into this video. And so since this is my second time doing a low and slow cook on the Big Joe, I want to do another video where I share with you the things that I'm looking for and how that's going to change how I set up and use a new grill to me moving forward. So if you're new to your grill and you're trying to figure out what do I change, where do I start, bottom vent, top vent, more charcoal, less charcoal, more smoking wood, logs, chunks, etc. All these questions have a ton of content to share with you. So I'm actually going to do a standalone behind the scenes video to help you go through the process that I go through when I'm dissecting a cook to get information that will help me make adjustments in the future. So if you want to see that video, please go ahead and hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss it. Anyways, let's go back to yesterday when it's time to set up for today's cook. But we've got some leftover charcoal, so what I'm going to go ahead and do is remove the basket divider, remove our divide and conquer rack. We'll shake out our basket, remove the ash, and then when we install our basket back in, what we'll do is we'll go ahead and we'll put the coals that are left over to each side, and I'll pick you up there where we're going to then walk through wood placement as well as how we're going to build our fire around that. I'll take it. Okay, so we have made some space now in our charcoal basket. We've got all the ash out. I don't know if it came through on fast forward, but one of the things I like to do is just make sure, again, all of your air holes are clear and don't have any ash or anything that will restrict airflow. So what I'm going to use today for smoke is a piece of Texas post oak. It doesn't matter what you want to use. I like Texas post oak for brisket, keeping it that Texas style. But any wood that you do use, just make sure that it's chemical free and food safe. If you find some wood at the grocery store meant for campfires, that might be okay, but just make sure again it hasn't been sprayed with any pesticides or things like that. So this is organic, meant for either a pizza oven or a smoker, like what we're going to do today. So I'm going to place this on the bottom, and you can go left to right, front to back. That doesn't really matter too much. I prefer front to back because on a Kamado style grill, typically what happens is our fire works towards the back. That's sort of the natural draw for airflow. And this doesn't really bother me too much. Using the slow roller, you get edge to edge even heat, sort of regardless of where the fire orients itself to in the fire box. So that's not going to bother me at all. But what we're going to do for covering it is just, again, make sure if there's 1 or 2 coals extra, I'll place them at the back so that we have plenty of fuel. And when we light our Big Joe earlier on, I'll start the fire just front of center here. Again, knowing that it'll naturally progress to the back. So we're just gonna start covering up this wood, especially with the smaller leftover charcoal pieces that I have, and then we'll add in some fresh Big Block. I love using Big Block for these overnight cooks because, again, you just get that airflow able to move through the pieces and keep your fire going. I've had some other brands where they're really, really small chips, and while they're fine for just doing burgers or sausages or things like that, I don't prefer it for low and slow cooks because really fine pieces tend to ash up, and then the ash has nowhere to fall down. And I've had fires go out and get an alarm on the probe at 3 in the morning, and then you're coming out here all confused trying to figure out what's going on with your fire. So I don't want to deal with any of that. I want a great night's sleep, as I'm sure you do. And so what we're going to do is just push this charcoal together and then add in a little bit more Big Block to be ready to go. All right, I'm happy with how we have our coals oriented. And so we took some time there just to make sure that we had, actually let me remove that so you can still see. Still have some air holes visible all the way around. I can see the bottom grate in a few places. On the back, we're slightly skewed again with our charcoal towards the back, so as the fire burns back there should be plenty of fuel to carry us throughout the night. And then I've just stacked, building as you would, a campfire, and I think we're good to go. So let's go ahead, we'll install the slow roller base. I'll add a fire starter cube, and then we're gonna close everything up, and I'll rejoin you later tonight. Okay, so for our low and slow cook, we want to get some heat in our upper ceramics. So we are going to wait till we see a dome temperature of about 225 to 240 degrees, just overshooting ever so slightly our targeted cook temp, before we start to install the rest of our slow roller, our cooking grids, and hopefully by that time we're close to finishing up trimming our brisket. Let's go inside and we'll get ready for rejoining you outside when it's time to put on the brisket. Okay, let's go ahead and mix up our rub, and then we'll be ready to season up our brisket. So I'm just going to use a leftover spice container and add in our ingredients, which again is Diamond Kosher crystal salt. Not the best jars for pouring. Some black pepper. Our garlic. And our smoked paprika. Just go ahead and mix that up. And our rub is ready. I'll bring you a little closer and clean this up. You can trim up our brisket. All right, let's go ahead and remove the plastic, and then we'll start trimming up the brisket. Okay, since on a Kamado cooker you want your fat cap towards the heat source, you don't really get any fat melting down, which would help moisten the meat. And because of that, and that fact that we're going low and slow, I'm actually going to do a pretty aggressive trim on this fat cap because I don't think we need too much of it, and I'd like the seasoning to stick better and get a better bark. So go ahead and trim off our fat cap, as well as some of that hard intermuscular fat in between the point and the flat. Okay, so in real time, that was about 18 minutes worth of trimming. I think my scale just shut off, but I was curious. That was 2.9 pounds out of our 15-pound packer brisket that we removed. So we're down to just over 12 pounds left, which is more meat than fat. It's amazing how much you take off here. Again, I'm not concerned because you can see there's not a lot of meat in here. This is just hard fat, stringy fat, and not anything that we really want to eat. So I'm not missing anything. Anyways, let's go ahead and get our wireless probe, and I'll meet you outside when it's time to throw this on our Kamado Joe Big Joe. All right, it is just after 12:30 in the morning and our grill looks to be stable. So I've gone and added our meter wireless probe, which I'm going to use to track our cook. More so because I'm just interested in the night when I'm fast asleep. What happened? Did our temperatures hold steady? How quickly did our meat progress? So we can adjust our game plan tomorrow. When we get close to finishing this brisket, I'm going to switch to my ThermaPen and go by feel, but this is just going to help me do my work back schedule and figure out, do I want to wrap it? Can I let it ride? How quickly is it climbing? So it's going to give me a ton of helpful information that'll help me come up with the game plan when I rejoin you in the morning. So right now, looks like we are holding about 210, 215 degrees. Let's go ahead and get our brisket on. And I'm gonna stay up just a little bit longer just to watch it and make sure that there's no spikes upwards or downwards after we open the dome and get our brisket on. And then I'm gonna go ahead and call it a night, and I'll see you in the morning. One more thing before I leave you is the way that we're gonna orient our brisket is I'm gonna put the point end, the thick end, if you're new to brisket, towards the back, because again, that's the natural direction that our fire burns. And if anything is gonna get a little bit more heat, I don't mind the point getting that versus the flat. Now, in my experience doing chicken wings and a whole bunch of other things, there's no such thing as a hot spot when using the SloRoller. That's one of the things that I love about it. But just in case I have to pick a direction, and so for lack of any other reason, that's the way that I'm gonna go. Front to back with the flat at the front, the thin end at the front, and the thick end at the back. So let me reposition the camera a little bit closer, get this on the grill, and I'll see you when it is brighter in the morning. Okay, so now it is time to figure out our work back schedule for our brisket. So we have stalled out here about 183 degrees according to our meter wireless probe. And if you haven't seen this probe, I'll put a link in the description down below. But I want to be able to serve this brisket around 5 for an early dinner. And I want at least a 2-hour rest if I can in our foil towel inside a cooler. And so at this rate, it's not going to finish in time, maybe even for 5, let alone be able to get that rest that we want. So I already know from previous cooks that once we wrap this brisket, we could see as much as 20 degrees an hour. And so I'm not going to add any broth or other liquid. I'm just gonna go ahead and wrap it in foil and then let the juice that it captures from the brisket itself be anything that it braises in. Our bark is more than set since we have been cooking since midnight last night. What we want to do now is just retain any of that moisture and help make sure that this brisket finishes in time for that 2 or 3 hour cook. I'll bring you a little closer while we wrap this up. Fast forward. All right, it's been about 2 hours since I left you last time, and there's been some torrential rain in between, but I've waited until we had a window because I think it's about time to check with our ThermaPen for probe feel in terms of what our brisket's feeling like. I'm not sure it'll quite be done yet, but I want to get a good sense where we are for timing. If we're close right now, we'll be ready to pull it off, put it in our cooler, or if we're not even close yet, we know we'll ride a little bit longer. Just speaking of rain, that's one of the reasons though I love the Kamado Joe for 2 reasons. One, for a short period, but the power went out, so if you're cooking on a grill that needs electricity like a pellet smoker or using a fan, those power outages can throw you for a bit of a loop. And the other reason why I really love this vent cap, well, I'm getting a few drips because the pergola here does not offer complete protection. The rain was blowing sideways, and so I didn't have to worry about our fire going out and or our brisket getting wet. Not that it would right now because it's wrapped in foil, but if that had happened earlier, that's another reason why this cap is so great. Anyways, enough about rain. Let's get a little bit closer and take a look for our probe feel. Okay, you're going to want your high heat gloves for handling the brisket. I've switched to these ones you might have seen from my older videos. I had bought a few sets of the other ones, and over time they were getting holes in them and burning out. And I didn't really notice until we started doing a lot of extra cooking during coronavirus, but they weren't lasting. So I've updated my link down below to these because after a month or two of using them, they're holding up really well. Anyways, if you want to check those out, I'll put a link down below. The smells coming off of this are incredible. So let's start down here in the flat. No, still a little tension. Actually, maybe I'll take that back. A little tension, not too bad. And we are seeing temps in the 211 range. Let's go ahead and check our point. Oh yeah. That's what we're after. Look at that. Just let go and it falls right through the brisket. So that is probing like butter. So our point feels great. Our flat feels pretty darn good. Not as good, especially right here. Does not feel as good as the point. But I don't want to overcook that point any further. So we're gonna go ahead and call that a cook. Let's go ahead and wrap this back up. Let it rest for a second just out here before we put it in the cooler so we don't get any carryover cooking. And then we'll wrap this up in a towel and put it in the cooler and let it rest a couple hours. Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and wrap this in a towel. Do not use a towel that you are too attached to. As you can see, just a couple hours in foil and our brisket has pushed out some of that fat that's rendered down. So it's also going to help add some of that flavor as it reabsorbs back into our meat during the rest, which is why the rest is almost as important as the entire cook. But it's going to make a mess of our towel, so be sure to use an old one. Ask me how I learned that. Anyways, let's go fast forward, get this off in a towel and into our cooler. This, if you've heard the acronym, is the FTC method. Foil, towel, cooler, and we're aiming for, I think we're at about 2.5 hours here of our rest before we slice this up. All right, so about 18 hours after we threw it on, our brisket is cooked and rested. Let's remove it from the cooler, get it on our cutting board, and get ready to dig in and get some slices. Okay, so just by touch, I can tell the way that this is wiggling. We've got a good brisket on our hands. Let's go ahead and take some slices. I'm first gonna separate the point from the flat. Alright, there's nothing better than waiting 18 hours to see this kind of result. We've got a beautiful smoke ring as well as juices galore. I'm going to go ahead and take a couple slices of the flat as well as a couple slices from our point end, and we'll do our taste test. Okay, so as you saw with our slicing, the flat looked great. Our point was a little bit fattier than I thought. So there was some extra fat that had rendered down, made it a little bit more difficult to slice, but the meat looks amazing. If anything, I might have let it go maybe just a touch too long in foil. I was counting on about 20 degrees per hour. This might have just come up about 5 degrees too far. Anyways, let's dig in and find out. This is still piping hot. We'll go ahead and grab a slice here from the flat that looks to be about, so we got a flapper, bends, and with the slightest pull, just comes right apart. This looks so juicy. Let's go ahead and dig in and find out how our brisket is. Wow. This is the best brisket flat I've ever done. It is incredibly moist, tender as you saw, folds right over. pull apart, still strong enough to hold up under its own weight, and the seasoning is spot on. Anyways, I'm going to keep going in this brisket if I leave it in front of me much longer. I hope you really enjoyed today's cook. I'm assuming you can maybe see behind me family bouncing around. We have our neighbors over, so I'm not going to delay this video any longer. I hope you really liked it. If you did, please go ahead and smash that thumbs up button and hit subscribe to catch future videos. I really look forward to seeing you then. Until then, I'm James from Smokin' Dad Barbecue, signing off.